Okay, there we go. Recording has started.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and, I need the ability to share my screen too.
All right, there you go.
All right. All right, so welcome everyone. Hopefully you see the first one says NCyTE Faculty Development Academy. So welcome everyone to this month's meeting. My name's John Sands. I've presented on a couple of these in the past. I'm one of the co-PIs for the NCyTE Center, and I'm a faculty member and department chair at Moraine Valley Community College, and we're right outside the Chicago area in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. So today I'm going to talk to you about the NCyTE Center and what's happening in the area of faculty development. Specifically, I'm going to talk about opportunities that either are available now or will be available in the near future. And then we're also going to ask for some participation in a couple of the programs that we're sort of leading, and there may be some. So you may have some interest in a couple of the programs where we're preparing new faculty members for the two-year and technical college community. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. If there's no questions to start with, any questions or comments before we get started? All right, feel free to make a comment, interrupt, ask questions, whatever, as we go through this. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and start with what we're doing in the area of faculty development for the National NCyTE Center. So NCyTE is the National ATE Center for the National Science Foundation in the area of cybersecurity. Okay, and one of our major goals as a center is to work with faculty, right, and provide faculty with resources and training opportunities and things like that. So what I want to do today is just sort of summarize some of the things that are going on and make you aware of those things and how to get access to some of the resources that have been developed, and how you can register for different classes, and potentially how you can access new faculty members that we'll be working with. Okay, so as a center, what we're trying to do is strengthen the pool of faculty. So what that basically means is that we want to work with existing faculty, as well as try to recruit and attract new faculty in the area of cybersecurity to teach in two-year and technical colleges. Okay, and as part of that, one of our major goals is to update skills. One of the unique things about teaching cybersecurity, and I'm sure I'm speaking to an audience that understands this, is that this is a field that is in continuous flux and change, right? And unfortunately, we talk about new technologies and trends and things like that, but in academia, we're usually very slow to implement new things and incorporate those things into our classrooms. And one of the things that we do at the NCyTE Center is try to enable you to do that, to try to, first of all, identify what are the trends that are, and what are the new technologies in cybersecurity, and how can we provide training and resources so that you can incorporate those things in your existing curriculum. So, just one example of that would be at the federal government level, we have a massive change in federal agencies, and specifically in the Department of Defense. And what's happening in the Department of Defense is, as you probably know, the Department of Defense is one of the country's largest employers and contractors, right? They buy everything from pencils to tanks and aircraft carriers, right? Well, one of the things that Congress has tried to do over the years is to strengthen our supply chain's cybersecurity posture, right? And part of that program is a new initiative that was passed a couple of years ago called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program. And what this does is it requires all contractors across the country that contract with the Department of Defense to actually go through a security compliance process. In other words, they have to go through a security audit and prove that they meet minimum requirements for cybersecurity. And you can understand why we want to do this, right? The military supply chain is absolutely critical that we protect that supply chain, and that we protect the vendors and the end customer, our military, in that process. Well, that's going to impact the workforce dramatically. It's going to drive the need for many more cyber professionals, and it's also going to require that our professionals have a better understanding of what a cybersecurity audit is all about and how their work directly relates to an audit and a compliance program. So one of the things that we've been doing at the NCyTE Center over the last year and a half, 2 years, is we developed a full class on the cybersecurity maturity model. We've been offering courses. So if you want to implement a auditing course, a cybersecurity auditing course within your curriculum, we have been developing materials and literally a full-blown course, and it aligns to one of the nation's major certification programs, the CISA, the Certified Information Security Auditor. And we've offered that a couple times this year. The class is filled each and every time that we've run it. And we've gotten a lot of feedback. In fact, we've had several faculty members now go through the class and then actually take the certification exam. And one of the benefits is that we have funding. So if you take that certification, we can actually reimburse you for the cost of that certification. So if you take the certification and pass it, I should say, you can come back to us, with proof that you passed a certification, and we can actually reimburse you for the cost of that certification exam. Okay. So that's an example of how we're trying to update skills. Now, there are many other examples of updating skills. So part of it is, how do we make the things that we teach in the classroom relevant and represent real world needs, right? So one of the things that we do is we try to continuously incorporate new tools, technologies, websites within our programs, and try to develop content that we can then give to you to upgrade your faculty skills and incorporate new types of technologies within your classroom. Okay. So that's another major goal that we're trying to achieve. The next thing that we're doing is trying to expand the pool. So this is sort of an exciting program that's going on that you should know about. We have this fellowship program. And what we're doing is we're working with universities across the country to try to reach college students, specifically in the STEM areas, and if possible, in the computer science and technology areas, and try to expose them to careers in education, and specifically careers in cybersecurity education. So we've had a series of orientation sessions that we've worked with groups of students from different universities. And we basically expose them to what teaching is all about, what teaching in community college is all about. And then we invite them to a full-blown summer camp where we give them curriculum, we teach them how to use the curriculum, we have them practice teaching things in the classroom, and try to prepare them to be either assistant instructors or to be adjunct instructors, and potentially to pursue full-time instructor positions at community college and technical schools across the country. So we have a group that's meeting next week, and we're going to be looking for institutions that would be willing to take one of these participants, one of these fellows, while they're still in school, and let them assist in a class. Or in some cases, some of these students they've already got undergraduate degrees, and they're interested in actually being an adjunct professor for like an online course, or if they're in your area, for an actual in-person course in cybersecurity. So we'll have a pretty substantial group that's going to be graduating here this summer. And one of the things that we're looking for are schools that would be willing to work with us to take on one of these students, put them under a senior faculty member, and let them work with a senior faculty member in teaching one of your classes. I think the best way to recruit new students is to, first of all, introduce them to what a career in education is all about, and then to really match them up with a top professor from an institution, or a top instructor from an institution, and actually let them experience teaching a class. I know for myself, after doing that, it started an interest in my own career pathway, and I ended up going in, taking a totally different pathway than I went to school for, right? So I went to school to be an engineer. I got involved in teaching, and for the last 34 years, I've been a faculty member, right, and a department chair and so on. So this program really is a great opportunity to reach new faculty members. So, first of all, just to open a discussion, anyone interested in a program like that? So I mean, we've done surveys and we know faculty from across the country, I should say institutions from across the country have a shortage of faculty. And this is one way we can address that. So what we'd like from you, if you're interested in participating, we are actually going to have a sort of a match-up session next Friday where we're going to introduce these, the participants in this program and talk about colleges around the country that would have some interest in hosting one of these students in either an assistant role or potentially an adjunct faculty role. And it could be in person based on where they're from and where your institution is, as well as online courses. Okay. And Mike just posted the workshop and a link to it. And like we said, Friday, we're going to have an event where we actually want to invite people to meet these individuals that have completed the program. And by the way, there's funding. So we're supporting them financially to be part of this program and to pursue, a potential career in education. Okay. So Laura, okay, so we would be interested in, and yeah, please put your post up here if you have an interest, because we really want to match these students with potential schools this fall. Our goal is to match every single student with an institution, and I know our institution is interested. So we may actually take a couple of these fellows and have them work with one of our senior faculty members this fall and help teach a class. Okay. So that's what expanding the pool is all about. And if you're from a university that has a cybersecurity program or a computer science program, or really any STEM program that deals with technology, and you might have students that would be interested in being part of this program, they don't have to commit to changing their careers. I mean, we want to convince them to change their careers, but what they commit to is going through a program that's going to teach them about managing a classroom, pedagogy, how to deliver curriculum, to connect content with the students, relevance, things like that. Really what we call 21st century classroom management skills. So we put them through that entire program. We give them curriculum. We teach them how to use a lot of tools. So they may even bring things into a classroom that you might not be, you might not be using now. So I think there could be a real benefit for you to consider taking one of these students, right? And the next thing that we're really interested in doing is building a national community of practice. What do we mean by that? Well, what we've been doing over the last year, because the grant was it just started last year. So over this last year, we've been building a national team of train-to-trainers. But if you're not interested in train-to-trainers, we're looking for faculty members that would be interested in helping us identify what type of content would help you in your current classes. What type of programs would enable you to teach new and more relevant content in your cybersecurity programs? All right. One of the most difficult things we understand as a faculty member at a community college is to make changes in your curriculum and incorporate some of these things into curriculum. No individual faculty member can really take on a lot of those things. So what we try to do as a community of practice is we have funding out there to help us develop assessment tools. So if you have, a specialty or you're interested in those types of things, it would really be good to contact us and we could have you join a team that's working on assessment and student competencies and how can we incorporate those things in our classrooms so employers have, really concrete ways of seeing or ways of measuring the competencies that our students are graduating with. Okay. The other thing we're doing is we're creating interactive content. You've probably seen a lot of the things that we've been developing. We have an entire library out there now. So if you haven't seen it, you can get to it from the NCyTE website. You can also get to it at we call them eMates. So my eMates subnet.com. So it's up on you can see the entire library. We have about 140 interactive lessons up there now, and we're continuing to build those. But what we're looking for is for you to look at those things and, oh, I've looked at this one you did on subnetting. It would really be good if you could create one on this. And that's how we build these new ones, is that we have people from the community say, this is a difficult topic to teach. Could you come up with some type of interactive tool and maybe some type of assessment instrument that we could use in our classrooms to improve the way we teach this particular topic or enable us to teach this new topic, okay? And I can give you, examples of this. In fact, when I get done with this, I'll show you one short, simple example of what we're doing to do things like that, okay? And then finally, what we're looking in the community of practice is for people that would be interested in teaching new faculty members or these fellows coming out of universities that would have an interest in teaching. We need to build a bigger, more diverse team that represents the entire nation. We're a national center. Right now, we've got about 16 members that help us teach classes, and I can tell you, all 16 of these members are about as busy as they can get between teaching their classes with their home institutions and the things that they're working on with us as a group. But if you'd have an interest in that, again, we would be really interested in reaching out to us. And there's a lot of benefits to it. We have annual meetings where we get together at different conferences or different events and really just sit down and talk about what kind of things can we do to make a difference in this space to improve cybersecurity education at this level, right? I can tell you in my case, there's a big movement now in Illinois that we are looking at deploying BAS programs, Baccalaureate of Applied Science, and they're looking to the community colleges as a potential host for those institutions. And I know Whatcom, the host institution for NCyTE, has a program, and I know there's programs in Ohio and in Florida and so on. So we could really use the people from those institutions to work with colleges across the country that are just now looking at that and considering the idea of creating these Baccalaureate of Applied Sciences. I can tell you in our case, I've reached out to several individuals that have gone through this process and gone through the process of having the state approve a baccalaureate degree out of the community college. And I can tell you, we've done a lot of workforce studies in Illinois and needs and so on. And there really is a need in our community. But we could use the experience of other schools that have gone through that process and deployed those programs. I don't know if anyone else in the community is actually, if your states are looking at the same type of things, but there are several states right now that are considering that as a way of addressing the shortage in the cybersecurity workforce. All right. The last thing in one of our goals is to make that instructor pipeline more diverse. So we talked about this fellowship program. One of the things that we did in the fellowship program is we actually reached out to historically Black serving universities and colleges across the country. And we specifically recruited a lot of their undergraduate and graduate students to consider careers in education. We need to make our faculty ranks more diverse, and that includes outreach to like YSIS and others to bring more women in. And we're doing the same thing with our train-the-trainer staff. We're trying to make that better represent the students that we're serving. All right, so those are really the goals of what we're trying to achieve. So I want to go into some specifics now and give you some examples of different things that we're doing. So hopefully most of you have gone to the NCyTE website and have looked at the types of classes and offerings that have been developed and offered to faculty members over the years. But look at the schedule. All right, this is this year's schedule of different things that are available. Now, not all of these are faculty development, but all of these are things that faculty can get involved in. But if you're looking at additional courses for your faculty. If you brought on new faculty and they need classes in specific areas, if you're looking at trying to improve credentials, a lot of our classes are designed that you take the class, we give you the materials, you go and take the certification, and now you can offer that within your program, and potentially your students could then go in and pursue those same types of certifications. And then there's other ones like CMMC. We've been offering CMC almost every other month, and every single month it's been filled. Part of what you can do with that class also is just offering courses to your local workforce. So these are also courses that could be offered not only to your credit students, but also to your workforce community. And when you take one of these courses, we give you the entire Canvas shell. So it includes all the content, all the interactives, all the labs, everything that you would basically need to teach that class. And you can take it whole, or you can take pieces out of it and use what you want out of it that fit into your curriculum. So you don't necessarily have to teach the entire class, but what you might do is overlay some of these things where they might be appropriate in your existing program. So we feel that that's a really critical aspect of rolling out and deploying new content and keeping our programs updated in this discipline. And there's a real need to do that. I mean, most of you know there's lots of things happening in our discipline that we really need to get a better handle on, and enable our students to have better skills and practical skills leaving our programs to address some of those threats and issues that our businesses and industries are facing. Okay. When we talk about our classes, we really have three categories of classes. So we have some that address like new trends. So CMMC would be an example of that. We have some that address new certifications and technologies. So that could be anything from like new wireless cloud-based infrastructure as a service. We offer a course in that, improvements to ethical hacking and pen testing, and other certifications, even things as simple as Security Plus. If you're looking for content and things for like Security Plus, we have offered courses in that as well. But then there's other areas like IoT, endpoint security, cloud security, virtualization, all of those kind of things. We're finding more and more need for, and the ability to incorporate those things in our curriculum. And we've partnered with Microsoft to do some of this. So Microsoft has been willing to share a lot of their educational resources free to us for these trainer classes, and then ultimately free for use with your students. And we're in the process of building a series of classes in partnership with Microsoft that you'll be able to attend in the near future. We've already offered a couple of those courses, including some in IoT. All right. And then the third category of classes is just how many of you have adjunct faculty members or other members that could really use background in the pedagogy or management of classes, okay, and of the teaching process. It's not always about teaching the technical aspects, because we get a lot of times we'll recruit people that come from industry and are really technically sound, right? But they've never taught. They don't know how to manage a classroom. They don't know how to assess students, right? They don't know how to build a succinct lesson plan and focus on engaging students and sort of flipping that classroom. So instead of being the sage on the stage, actually getting students engaged for the majority of the class and getting them involved in their own learning process. So we've been offering a series of workshops, and we're using the Microsoft curriculum. So Microsoft has a certified educators curriculum. They call it 21st Century Learning Process. And we've run a couple of these this year. We're going to be planning to run additional ones, but you can earn badges in it. You can also earn the actual degree, the certificate. So there's actually an industry certification. But more importantly, you can learn these concepts on ways that we can improve the teaching process and how we manage our classrooms. And I can show you one of those classes. I'll go and show you some of these things here in a minute. But those are the three main areas of faculty development that we offer through the Academy program. So I'm going to stop here for a second. Any questions? Any has attended any of those? All right. All right. Great summary. Okay. All right. Okay. So let me show you some examples of some things. Okay. So, we had a couple community colleges and faculty members from schools ask us, could you make some, practical kind of things that we can demonstrate, like the concepts that you're teaching with some of the e-mates and others. So what we've been doing over the
John,
Yeah.
are you sharing that screen? Because we're still looking at the calendar.
Yeah, I'm going to go to it in a second.
Okay, thanks.
In a second. Okay, so I'm going to go to this one right here. So I don't know how many of you have used Tinkercad, but one of the things that we decided to do was, part of the 21st century skills is to teach innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, and then most importantly, to make it relevant. Can you show something that's real that a student could relate to when we're talking about, concepts like, like an attack that attacks automation or process control systems and so on, right? So what our team is working on is a series of 25 labs. And those labs basically teach programming. They teach the use of smart devices. So anyone recognize what this device is right here? What am I showing on the screen right now? Does everyone see it? Okay, this is called a microbit, okay? It's a microcomputer. It's about the size of, it's about 2.5, 3 inches by 2.5 by, or 2.5 by 3 inches is approximately what it is, right? But it's a microcomputer. It has all kinds of sensors and capabilities built into it. You could afford to have every student buy one of these. You can actually buy one of these off of Amazon today for about $19, right? And I can tell you, there are a handful of countries in Europe today that are requiring this be taught starting in the 5th grade. Every student gets one of these, and we start to teach programming with this device. Okay, so when we came up with this, the idea of using this in our curriculums, we wanted to have some ways to incorporate it so that it enhanced what we're doing and showed some real practical examples of some of the things that we talked about. So how many are familiar with the Stuxnet attack? Have heard of the Stuxnet attack? Okay, that happened quite a while ago. I think it's like 9 years ago, right? But it really turned the cyber world upside down. Why? What was the big thing that happened in the Stuxnet attack that really, raised flags across the world in the area of cybersecurity, right? This was the first type of major attack that we used a cyber attack to actually attack physical equipment and a physical plant and actually destroy things, right? So not only did it destroy components in that plant, but it also destroyed the nuclear fuel that was trying to be enriched for nuclear weapons, right? So if for you that don't know what the Stuxnet attack was all about, it was an attack on an Iranian fuel enrichment plant. And the basics of the attack was is that the attack was injected through a worm, right? It was brought in with a USB drive. It had the ability to look for its target and look for the signature of its target, which happened to be a PLC. And that PLC was basically controlling a centrifuge. So we don't need to know all about how nuclear weapons are made and nuclear grade fuel is made and so on. But it takes these centrifuges that spin at a very high rate and a very accurate rate, right? And we use it to separate gas materials and then to use that to enrich the fuel itself, the uranium itself, right? Well, the idea behind the attack was to go after the PLCs that ran these centrifuges. And the scary part of this was it took over that system and told the operators that the systems were operating properly. And meanwhile, they would gradually turn the speed up on these centrifuges, right? Ultimately damaging and destroying the centrifuges themselves but even more importantly, spoiling the uranium that was going to be used for weapon grades uranium, right? So, after this happened, we were like, we really got to start talking about this. We have to incorporate these kind of things in our programs, because think of all the other physical kind of things that we now control through automation, through networking, through cloud sourcing, and so on, right? So could we start to incorporate some of these things in our classes so students could see exactly how something like this would work, and how code could be spoiled and so on, and how at the same time we could be reporting that the system is operating properly, right? So we came up with a series. We're doing 25 of these labs, but I just wanted to show you an example of one of them. So what this is a microbit controlling a micro servo. A servo could be used to control a valve. It could open a door. It could be used to control many things that we want to turn in a 360-degree fashion, right? And it's really easy to build this thing. I could build it in a matter of seconds, right? But this tool is really great to teach students how to use things like Arduino boards and smart boards to do things. So in this case, let's say we want to go in and look at this program. So we can have them both build this and actually look at the code that we use to develop this, right? And we can show the code in two forms, right? We can show the code both in block form, and we can show it in one of three different programming languages, right? So we could show it in C, we could do it in Python, we could do it in Java code, right? But we can teach them how to code or how to build it in block code to operate this and actually give feedback to the operators and so on, right? So in this case, what we're doing is a very, very simple operation, right? What we've done here in Blockly, in fact, I'm going to get rid of the text right now because we'll just make this real simple for today. So we're just going to do this with block code, right? But we pull out a block that says, okay, when we push one of these buttons, what we want to happen is for this servo valve to turn, all right, on 45 degrees, okay? So when we push button A, this is a button over here. When you push button A, the servo is going to turn 45 degrees. And then when we push button B, it's going to turn 90 degrees. Okay. And then we can use this matrix here to show the position of the valve to the operator, right? And then down here, we have this connected to inside this micro bit is actually a gyroscope that if we get vibrations like an earthquake or an attack or something like that, we could use that to actually return the valve back to the zero position. Okay. So in its normal operation, this is how it would work. If we go and hit start, and you can see how easy this is to build. I mean, I can show you building this from scratch and it takes like 5 minutes to do it. Okay. But we can hit button A, and you can see we get a 45-degree turn on what we're controlling, right? And then if we hit button B, it goes and we get a 90-degree turn on it, right? And for some reason, if we can get some kind of shaking within this unit, it will close it, okay? So what the Stuxnet attack basically did is they said, you know what, we're gonna let the operator know this is 45 degrees, but we're really gonna open this up to 110 degrees. Or we could gradually open it up. I could show you later, we could actually add something here to gradually open that up, all right? And when they hit 90 degrees, we're gonna actually open this to 180, okay? And if it starts to vibrate, we're not gonna close it. We're gonna leave it wide open, okay? Now, the problem here is that the operator's not gonna know what happened, right? The indicators are gonna stay the same. So if we go to run this now, we hit button A, the operator's indicator says, okay, it's open at 45 degrees, but look at how far it's open now, right? And if we hit B, it opens it even more. It's wide open now, even though the indicator thinks it's only open 90 degrees, right? And now the vibration won't work. It won't close it. They'll hear something that moves, but it doesn't close it, right? And that's essentially what we're doing in the type of attack that happened in Stuxnet attack, is that these sensors told the operator that it was operating properly, but the program was modified to actually damage the equipment. So to modify, so ultimately we would get damaged equipment. So yeah, we have a comment here. Yes, I was sharing how fake information is now being used to drive fake decisions. Exactly. That is a really great point. Yep. And that's a big part of this now, right? Is that the fake information, the information can no longer be trustworthy, right? Now, in this case, this could be really catastrophic based on what we're controlling here, right? It could be human safety concerns, there could be equipment safety concerns, so on. But what we want to do is to use a tool like this to actually give you and to teach you how to use this so that you can start to teach more practical types of applications of how someone might, go into a system, modify the code, and create real havoc. Right now, we've done a bunch of these. So, I'll show you my library real quick. So we've done things like light controls, so controlling street light systems. And I'm actually teaching a student class this week, and we challenge the students to take this and then build more to it, make it a more complex intersection, right? And we had students, from California put earthquake sensors on here. So if it shook, we got flashing red lights at the intersection. We had other students make crossing things. We had other students do some complex things if emergency vehicles came through and so on. But the idea is that, they can build this without having to be engineers, right? But they can learn the code. And one of the things that we're challenged them to do is to use both the block code and the C or the Python code. So and it's not that they're going to be programmers, but as a cyber person, you need to be able to interpret some code and have an idea how that code presents a vulnerability if someone's able to go in and actually modify it. Okay. So, so that's one of the exciting things that we're working on, that we'll be releasing through the Insight Center soon. And then we'll do some workshops on it. So we're going to have these IoT workshops where we teach you how to actually program these and how you can incorporate them within your classes and so on, right? We're looking at doing something similar in the future with things like virtualization, cloud computing, automation. And when we talk about automation, I'm talking about automation of IT environments, of information security environments. So those are some of the things that we've been asked to look at from the community. So every February, we do a needs assessment. And those were some of the things that people came back and said, could you offer some classes in this and give us some content that could enable us to present some of these different concepts in the classroom and have students work on them. So that's what we're working on. I can show you one other thing that we're in the process of building. How many of you have used CryptTool in your classes? Anyone use CryptTool? Okay, so yeah, okay. Hi, Chris. Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're working on as well. We're building a lab book for CryptTool as well. So what we want to do there is be able to teach cryptography in these different areas. So we want to show classical cryptography and have students be able to build cryptographic systems that represent classical cryptography. We want to go to modern cryptography and do symmetrical, so they can see what the difference is between a strong and a weak cryptographic system. We want to teach them asymmetrical cryptography. Then we want to go into things like hashing, HMAX, things like that, and also steganography. And we're going to build those tools using this free tool called CryptTool that enables us to show all of those things. So we've been teaching these in a lot of our classes over the last year, incorporating them. But now we decided, we're going to do a whole textbook and give it to you, or a whole lab book that you'll be able to use. It will have a series of labs that you can then incorporate those things in your classes. And by the way, that comes from the community. We just didn't say we're going to do this. We had people come to us and say, can you do this one? Okay. And then we go out to the community and say, hey, anyone know this? They could help us come in and build some of these things. And that's really what we do as a center. I mean, as a center, our goal is to work with you as our members and try to find out what are your needs and what are the kind of things that we can do to help improve your programs. Because that's part of what we have to do in this area. Too often, when we go through CAE reviews and stuff like that, and we ask people, what courses have you changed? What have you changed? And so on. They don't have a lot to show us, right? Well, we want to start to change that. We want to have lots of materials that you can incorporate and actually show when you go through your next CAE redesignation that, yeah, this class was looked at and here's how we're improving it, right? And then more importantly, how can we test that students learn these things and are leaving, with those competencies? So that's going to be another challenge of ours. I mean, we're early in the first year, right? But some of the things that we're looking at is working with some of the national people out there that are doing competency-based learning, and how can we package some of those and teach faculty to use them and thread it within their curriculum. Okay, so those are really critical kind of things that we are trying to do over the next couple of years. And we need your help as a community to get involved with these things and help us. And if you have people that are experts in certain areas, by the way, the person helping us write the Cryptool labs was a graduate of one of these universities that one of the faculty members said, hey, my student graduated this program and he's interested in writing, labs that do this or do that. And we actually hired him. And he wrote some great labs for us, and we'll be disseminating those this fall for you to see. Okay. The last area I want to talk about in here is a big part of teaching cybersecurity is that you have the tools and the environment to teach relevant skills, right? So most of us at this point have adopted virtual environments to do that, right? We're either using virtual machines on an individual standalone machine, or we're using something like a NetLab environment, right? Where we have pods of machines, or what we're trying to expand that to is that maybe you're using your local or regional cyber ranges and they're letting you use this. So we're trying to partner with, some of the regional and national cyber ranges to incorporate some of this curriculum and then share it out to schools so students can take advantage and use their resources to go through some of these different labs and so on, right? So one of the things that we're working on, some of you might have seen it, but we created a virtual game ability to go into this full facility that has 8 different rooms. You check in with your security tag and so on, but you're able to go out through this building and explore what people are doing in that building and the different roles and jobs that cybersecurity people perform in different tasks, right? Now, each of these rooms happen to be an area of the NICE framework, right? And we know the NICE framework is changing, so we're going to probably have to change this somewhat. But we have a room that's a SOC, right? And then we have a room where people are dealing with purchasing and assessing products that they're going to bring into the organization. We have another room that's looking at pen testing and threat analysis and so on, right? But the point is, students will be able to go in here in a 3D experience and be able to collect Easter eggs about these people. So what certifications do they have? What education levels do they have? What skills do they need? What do they do on a daily basis? What's the nature of work? Do they work in teams and so on, right? And we're trying to represent a big chunk of those 52 different work roles within the NICE framework. So that 3D version's coming out. The problem with it, it's very expensive because it has the full goggles. We bought 6 units that we're going to share at a regional level. So we're hoping to get those in the hands of some of the schools that want to use them. But what we decided to do was also do a 2D version of that. And we've got the prototype coming out in fact, we've seen the first version of the prototype and it looks really good. But it runs in HTML5. So any student on any platform that has a browser would be able to get a similar type of experience in going in and exploring careers rather than, you're just given a PowerPoint about different types of careers and stuff like that. It makes it more of a game and gamifies it, right? Well, one of the things that we found is that same environment we could use to actually do scenario teaching, right? So you could sit down in that room at that desk, and when you click on an interface, that could actually be a virtual machine, potentially on a cyber range or in a NetLab environment and so on. And we could use that to start to teach a little higher level of competencies in teaching students to deal with different types of situations, right? I mean, we have knowledge, skills, and abilities. And abilities is different in that it's how well can you use those knowledge and skills in different situations. And that's what we'll be able to start to work on in a virtual environment like that. But the real issue is that we're going to need your input into what kind of things should we build behind it? Who can we get to help us build some of those things, and so on. In some cases, we're actually hiring, professional companies that do this. And in other cases, our faculty members are working hand in hand with them. And in other cases, we're just building them ourselves. So we'll be rolling those things out. And again, all of these things will be backed up with faculty training. All right. And if you keep an eye on the NCyTE website, you will see a series of new classes that will be offered this fall, and then again spring, and then again in the summer. And then the other thing we're looking for is input on, how should we schedule them? Should they be Fridays and Saturdays? Should they be in the evenings? Should they be during the day? Can you get a whole week off to do it? Usually in the school year, we try to stay away from those kinds of schedules. But what types of schedules work for you in rolling these classes out? And we really need feedback from the community to be able to do that. Okay. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover. So the ask from you today is, if you're interested in participating next week in talking to some of our graduates of our fellowship camp, we would appreciate that. And I think you might be, pleased with, potentially having access to new adjunct or assistant faculty members. Any other ideas on content courses that you'd like to see offered, and things like that, and I wanted to give you some time for question and answers. So I think I'm going to end it here and just open it up and see if you have any questions, or we have any other ideas that we should be talking about. And what do you think of these? Are these things you think will be valuable to you? And I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll take a look at any comments.
Thanks, John, for sharing all that information. I just want to let everybody know I populated the chat with a lot of different links in there. I'll also be sending that out in a follow-up email with some additional links and information about other opportunities.
All right, and is it go? You have a comment?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you. I think it sounds outstanding and everything. In the scenario that you are encountering students that are actually interested in teaching, what kinds of things can we provide them for a way to get into this fellowship program, or as entry? Because that would be kind of more closer to home, to where.
Are you saying that you might have students who'd be interested in joining the fellowship?
Yes, that would help diversify the industry.
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, we have a monetary, so they're actually paid to go to the orientation, first of all, and we break it up for different stages. So the orientation is really about what it's like to teach, what are the potential salaries and things like that, but just giving them an overview of what teaching is like at a community college or technical school or a college or university. All right. What does a career pathway look like to get there? What do you need credential wise to do it, and so on? But we actually have an incentive they get, like, I believe it's $1,000 or $1,200 to go through the orientation part of it. Then what we do is we bring them through the whole summer work camp, and they also get a stipend to do that. And then we also pay them a stipend to be to serve as an assistant professor or an adjunct professor. So, it can help them paying off their tuition, supporting their family, things like that while they're going to school. So that's one incentive. But the other incentive is they get to actually work with a senior faculty member. So they're not just thrown in, to the fire. They actually work with someone, and then we gradually work them in where they can actually lead a lesson, and then go through on how to, assess and use different assessment tools and so on. So anything you'd want to add, Mike, to this one? Anything from NCyTE perspective?
Well, I think you've hit all the points really well, John. The need for cybersecurity subject matter experts to develop curriculum in order to expand our, educational pipeline so that we can meet the demands for employment. But I threw that link out there for the faculty academies that we are starting, that we're gathering information and interest on.
Yeah, and if you'd like to get involved, I'm having the president of our college address them and come to them and talk about, why is it so important to teach at these institutions and help us build this workforce, right? And we're probably gonna have someone from NIST and probably NSA come in and address the students. So I mean, and it's a nice network. They're not on their own. So I know a lot of times, women are sort of intimidated in some of these classes because they're, maybe the only one or two women in a class of 20. Well, in this program, it's not been like that. In fact, it's close to a 50-50 representation of male versus female. So I think it's a much more comfortable environment if they're interested in getting involved with this. And then we have a lot of females leading some of the things that we're doing in the program, and also minorities helping us, lead the program. So I hope that answers it. I'm not sure if I hit everything you're asking for, but.
You did, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right, so, again, what we'd like to hear from you though is if you'd be interested in hosting one of these students. I think it could be beneficial. It could be a new source of faculty members. And if you have needs out there, instructional wise, let us know at NCyTE what are some of the topics that need to be strengthened in your programs. What classes might be good for us to work on. And I think most of you know there's a ton of content on the website itself. So if you go to the NCyTE website, we've got everything from K-12 content to all kinds of content that can be used at the college and community college levels. And we also work with CARD and Clark. So those same items you'll find out on the Clark and CARD websites. All right. All right, Mike, you want to tell them anything about the next session then?
Yeah, thanks, John. So our next membership meeting really touches on something that John has talked about, and that is a cyber career challenge that Dr. Vincent Nessler piloted this last spring quarter. So we had teams of students who worked on virtual machines. They were from across the United States. They came together in teams of 3, put together virtual machines, created kind of a purchasing system, and they also had cyber. They had the blue team, the red team, and the orange team go through each other's programs, and they use CSET, the cybersecurity evaluation tool, is one way to test the system out as well. So Dr. Vincent Nessler and Stephen Miller will be talking about that at our next meeting, kind of the results of that. And it was a very popular, high demand, first time cyber career challenge event that we held. Let's see what else. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention before I let you go. The next one is, I don't know if John, if you mentioned this, but we have the STEAM event that's coming up next month at the Mall of America, where we have 2 workshops on the 10th and the 14th, and that will be on hacking the automobile computers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have one of the top people in the country that teaches that coming out to do that workshop. So he's done a TED Talk and so on. So Bryson will be the speaker for that.
And we have the registration on the web for that. And there's the dates for our next CMMC 2.0 workshops. I put the link out there for the 26th and the 27th. We had about 4 seats left on that. So if you're interested, please go ahead and register for that. But we have other dates available as well. We do need subject matter experts. So we have curriculum on the web, and every once in a while it needs to be refreshed and updated. Right now we're looking for health, IT, privacy and security, and or critical infrastructure security and resilience. If you're interested in looking at that curriculum and doing a refresh, we would there's funding available to do that as well. And as John mentioned, a lot of our information now is on clark.center and CARD. If you haven't used clark.center or CARD, really recommend going out there and taking a look at that. for getting curriculum, for building your own curriculum and adding components for cybersecurity. We also have this Center of Academic Excellence here. We work with that center, and we need advisors, mentors, pre-submission reviewers, and peer reviewers. Again, it's a great opportunity for faculty professional development, and a great way to see how other institutions are managing their cybersecurity programs. So, you know, as you're an accreditor or as you're auditing somebody else, you learn a lot going through that process, best practices, and it's a great way to go back to contribute back to your community. So we can help you steer you towards that as well. CAE Candidates Program Overview. So again, that's we lead this program helping universities and community colleges obtain their certificate of academic excellence. And what else? Clark, we have, here's the clark.center. We have a number of learning objectives out there. Again, for our resources for faculty, development academies, and free program development workshop if you're looking to improve or develop your cybersecurity program. And last thing, save the date, September 16th, there's a virtual career fair. We had over 50 employers and 1,400 students last year. I think the last time I talked, I heard they have over 80 employers right now. And please join us on multimedia. Thank you for your time. John, do you have any closing comments?
No, I just thanks everyone for attending. And if you put your information up there, we will be reaching out to you for the Friday event. So.
Yeah, thank you very much for attending. I know we're right at the 10 o'clock. I apologize for rushing through those last slides, but this was a great, I thought a great membership meeting. And John, thank you again for sharing all that information. And I hope to see you all at the next membership meeting or see your emails come flying through for signing up for some of these workshops. And if there aren't any other comments, thank you again for attending, and we will wrap this up. Have a great weekend, everybody.